The NBA's had some of the most polarizing athletes the sports world has ever seen. And that's not limited to their stars. They've had countless NBA athletes leave an unforgettable mark on the sports world. But I'm here to talk about the most influential players the NBA has ever seen. Players that completely have revolutionized the NBA, whether it be through playing style, the business, the brand, or even the NBA culture. But before I get into it, this will be broken down into decades. And we're going to start with the 1950s. Now this is pretty much a forgettable time for the NBA. Not too many NBA fans even acknowledged that the league existed in the 50s. At this time, the NBA was nowhere near as popular as it is right now, nor was it diverse as the NBA is right now. But at the time, the most influential or revolutionary player was George Mikan. And as much as people in the NBA community like to insinuate that Wilt Chamberlain dominated a watered-down era, the argument may hold more weight when you look at George Mikan in the 1950s. Although he was the most prominent name and most dominant player of the time, he's also left a noticeable impact on the game. Not so much as the brand or the business, as the NBA didn't take many leaps forward during this decade, but the most noticeable imprint from George Mikan was the widening of the paint from 6 feet to 12, otherwise known as the Mikan rule. He also contributed to the creation of the shot clock, as a lot of his dominance relied on being able to shoot over smaller defenders, backing them down into the paint, taking long possessions. And last but not least, the minor influence he has, as we all know, the Mikan drill. I'm sure anybody who's ever played basketball has done. Now let's get into the 60s. I think it goes without saying the most dominant, the most influential, and the overall most revolutionary players of this decade were Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell. Now these players had very different impacts on the game, but they've left unforgettable stamps on the game. Let's start with Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain is the reason for a handful of rule changes in the NBA. A few of the most recognizable ones being goaltending and the infamous alley-oop from the baseline out of bounds. Teams no longer can throw the ball over the hoop to taller players to get an easy basket on a baseline out of bounds. Now Wilt also forced the NBA to expand the paint yet again from 12 feet to 16 feet. And the reason for this was most of his paint touches on the block were within close distance of the hoop, where he could put on a finger roll, a sky hook, with little effort at all, with the paint being so condensed and close to the basket. And believe it or not, the last noticeable rule change that Wilt Chamberlain forced the NBA to implement was forcing free throw shooters to shoot from behind the line. Wilt Chamberlain, every now and then, due to the fact that he was a terrible free throw shooter, oftentimes he would try to get a running start within the half circle and jump forward from the free throw line, trying to get as close as possible to the rim to increase his chances of making a free throw. Outside of these rule changes, we all know Wilt Chamberlain's imprint on the game, being easily the most dominant big man we've ever seen, posting astronomical numbers, and not only being one of the most talented NBA players the world's ever seen, but one of the most talented athletes overall. Now let's get into what Bill Russell's contributions were to the NBA during this decade. Let's start off with the fact that Bill Russell was the NBA's first maniacal competitor and consummate winner. Bill Russell's actually stated that before every single game, from the time he put on sneakers for the first time, he would throw up before a game due to the anxiety he would get from the competition and the thrill of playing in the game. And hearing stories like that, it comes as no surprise to why his teams were able to win at such a high clip. And as a result of winning 11 championships in 2009, the NBA officially named the NBA Finals MVP trophy after Bill Russell. Although Bill Russell wasn't one of the flashiest scorers the league has ever seen, he is widely accepted as the greatest defender the NBA has ever seen, and has practically become the face of the quote, defense wins championships. Now, Bill Russell also had a huge impact off of the court, especially in breaking color barriers for NBA players, whether it came to color commentary, coaching, political activism. Bill Russell was a huge influence for the league, the players, in numerous aspects of the game. He also had an imprint on the business of the NBA by even galvanizing the All-Stars in 1964 to boycott the All-Star game if the owners didn't comply with the players' demands of implementing a pension plan for NBA players at the time, which the Players Union ultimately came to win. And as I said before, Bill Russell had a major impact in breaking color barriers for the NBA. He became the first black head coach, and not only did he become the first head coach, he won the championship his first year as a coach, where he served as the first ever player coach, and I believe the only player coach to have held that honor in the NBA. And yes, as you could imagine, he played every single minute of every single game, averaging 48 minutes, truly living every basketball player's dream, making all the decisions and playing all the minutes. Now let's fast forward into the 70s. The 70s was a pretty strugglesome time for the NBA. They faced a serious cocaine epidemic. NBA Finals series were going on tape delay. There wasn't necessarily any major figures that were prominent in the league at this time, but a lot of the brand was resurrected by the star power of Dr. J. Now, Dr. J didn't have the global impact of, say, Michael Jordan, but for the 70s, he had a similar impact to that of Allen Iverson. Dr. J was viewed as the consummate professional, all while having an aura of charisma that seemed to center around him. And not only that, Dr. J was really one of the first pioneers for the dunk becoming an art form. If you're a basketball savant, I'm sure you know he was the first player to jump from the free throw line. Dr. J brought a whole nother flair to the NBA that they have never seen since its existence in the 50s. So ultimately, his revolutionary impact for the NBA was strictly culturally, whether it be style in his off-court apparel, the creativity on the court, with so many memorable and iconic moments in the NBA. Whether he's rocking the cradle on the Sixers, making the most iconic move on the baseline, or dunking on Bill Walton in the NBA Finals. Now let's get into what Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem was the exact opposite when it comes to personality type when you're comparing him to Dr. J. Kareem was a very introverted player, and many reporters felt he was standoffish and not too approachable at times. And we all know Kareem's got the most iconic move in NBA history, that being the sky hook, where we haven't even seen a player replicate it to the success that he did. But you can contribute his most revolutionary impact to expressing and expanding the NBA's opportunity to engage in political and social discussions. Kareem, being one of the highest scholars the NBA's ever seen, was highly engaged in political and social dialogues and was undoubtedly the most influential NBA player in that aspect at this time. Now let's get into the 80s. The 80s was a huge leap forward for the NBA, and I think it pretty much goes without saying the two figures that revolutionized the NBA and really basketball forever. And obviously those players being Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. And if I'm being honest, it would be impossible to encapsulate their impact on the game in just this video, but I'll make an attempt to break it down as best as I can. One of the first major influences of Magic and Larry Bird at this time was obviously their rivalry. Their rivalry alone pushed forward the NBA in so many aspects, to where the NBA Finals no longer were on tape delay. They were now being viewed live. The NBA was now reaching a new level of popularity it had never seen before. And in large part, that was due to the polarizing rivalry of Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. Now, I said Dr. J and Kareem were complete opposites. Magic and Larry Bird were complete opposites to the 100th degree. Magic was Showtime, Magic was charisma, the smile. He was Hollywood, and it just so happened to be he played for the Lakers, the most glamorized NBA franchise in NBA history. And then you had Larry Bird leading the Boston Celtics, almost seeming like your average blue-collar worker, coming into work, punching in the time clock with his lunch pail. Never had over-the-top celebrations, but was completely passionate and aggressive about the game. So you can contribute a lot of what I just stated in the business and brand aspect of the NBA. And not only when you look at the brand, they also expanded their personalities into other endeavors outside of the court. Being two of the first players to get shoe deals, do commercials, and really become prominent faces in pop culture, especially when you look at Magic Johnson. And lastly, when you look at the effect Magic Johnson and Larry Bird had on the NBA, it's undeniable. As I said, Magic was Showtime, which was the face of the fast break and transition basketball, getting up and down the floor, the most integral piece of that Lakers team, doing literally everything from rebounding to passing to scoring, and Larry Bird matching that skill set. But while also being the first dominant 6'10 shooter the league's ever seen. And if we're being honest, Larry Bird brought an element to the game that really hasn't been seen since his presence in the league, where he was strictly a technician on the floor, whether it be on offense or defense. But I'm going to end it there because, as I said before, this decade and era of basketball could really go on forever. So now let's head into the 90s. And this pretty much goes without saying too. There was no other player that compared to the impact, the influence, or the way they revolutionized the game like Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was the NBA in the 90s. And if we're being honest about this, Michael Jordan could have a whole feature about his impact on basketball all by himself. So let's break down a few aspects that are undeniable. When you look at the brand of basketball, Michael Jordan made the game a global game by expanding the game overseas. And that became more prevalent than ever when the 1992 Dream Team played in Barcelona for the Olympics, and Michael Jordan was seen as a rock star all across Europe, while never playing a single game there in any years prior. Which will transition us to a major aspect of Jordan's career, and that's the business of the game when you look at his shoe endorsements and establishing himself as a brand. Michael Jordan sells more sneakers than any current NBA player, and he hasn't even played a game in 25 years. Jordan was a major mover for Nike as a corporation, and you can attribute a lot of their shoe expansion with NBA players to Michael Jordan himself. And not only was Jordan a major mover in the shoe industry, he also set the precedent for players getting paid what they're worth. Now, for a major part of Michael Jordan's career, he was underpaid. When you look at the value he brought to the Chicago Bulls and really the NBA overall. But going into the 1998 season, he righted those wrongs when he signed the largest deal the NBA's ever seen up until Mike Conley signed his deal, where he signed a 1-year deal for $33 million. Now, mind you, at this time, Michael Jordan's salary alone was more than 19 of the other 29 teams in the league. And that $33 million contract would be equivalent to $68 million 1 year in today's NBA. Now that we established Jordan's money effect, let's look at the cultural impact he left on the NBA. As I said, Jordan sneakers are a staple in basketball in general. But he also brought a style the league had never seen. Whether it be the hoop earring, the chain in the dunk contest, the rolled down calf sleeve, and being a major influence for the longer shorts in the NBA. But last but not least, play style. Jordan brought flair, excitement, a whole nother level to playing the game of basketball. Whether it was on layups, whether it was on dunks. And we all know he brought a level of intensity that the NBA had never seen up until that point, and really, maybe even ever. Michael Jordan is easily the most ferocious competitor, not only in basketball, but maybe in the world. And the list of stories goes on and on of the borderline psychopathic stories you hear of how competitive he truly was. Michael Jordan also popularized the term a hero ball. I don't know if there was an NBA player before Michael Jordan that put such an emphasis on being the player to count on in the fourth quarter. The whole idea of being clutch was popularized by Michael Jordan. We hadn't seen a player make as many game-winning, game-tying, or clutch plays in the crunch time of NBA games as many times as we did with Michael Jordan. But let's just stop it there, because this section really spans from basketball from the 90s up until now. Jordan's revolutionary effect on the game is borderline everlasting. So let's transition now into the 2000s. If we're being honest, the 2000s in terms of rating, popularity, was really a dark time for the NBA, as the NBA was really experiencing a downturn due to the fact that Michael Jordan had retired. What Michael Jordan did for the NBA was just about impossible to replicate once he was gone, but there were a few players that revolutionized the game and really saved basketball during the 2000s. The first one being Allen Iverson. I think a lot of people begin to recognize Allen Iverson's contributions to the NBA years after the fact, when you can truly appreciate the cultural impact that he had. When it comes to style, Allen Iverson is pretty much ingratiated in every single player's style up until this point. Whether it's the headband, the braids, and really the most noticeable accessory is the arm sleeve. It seems as if every player in the NBA wears an arm sleeve nowadays. And if you look at other sports, they're beginning to wear this accessory too on a daily basis. Allen Iverson didn't really have any major rule changes, but he was a major reason for why the NBA decided to enforce a dress code. And another aspect I don't think he necessarily gets appreciated for is his style of play. With him being such a small guard and leading the NBA in scoring for numerous years, winning MVP, and leading a team to an NBA Finals, he really paved the way for the golden era of point guards that we're experiencing right now. Now let me add another player before I get to really the major iconic athlete of this era, or decade I should say, and that's Dirk Nowitzki. Dirk is really the most underappreciated NBA legend the NBA has at this point in time. And you can attribute a lot of the foreign success to Dirk Nowitzki's career. He really opened the floodgates for a lot of European players, and really players overseas in general. And if you notice, every NBA draft, people not only draw comparisons to Dirk, but really refer to him as the face of foreign basketball in general. Anytime there's a promising European prospect, what do we always refer to him as? He's the next Dirk Nowitzki. And this leads into Dirk's biggest revolution to the game. And if you know Dirk Nowitzki, you know what it is. His contributions to the big man, to not only shooting the three, but dominating from the perimeter. I know a lot of older players like to attribute the stretch four to Bob McAdoo, Larry Bird, but if we're being holistically honest, a major component of Dirk Nowitzki's game was reliant on his back to the basket and being able to shoot his fadeaway jumper. Not only has that become his patented signature move, but his ability to be a 7-footer playing in the front court and dominate the league. Let's remember, Dirk Nowitzki has won 1 MVP, went to 2 NBA Finals, won 1 championship, and for a large part of his career, the Dallas Mavericks were considered contenders in the prime of Dirk Nowitzki's career. But there has always been one hurdle in Dirk's path, and that is Kobe Bryant. And a lot of Kobe's contributions to the game that we're starting to see now that his career is over is really the mentality that he brought to the game. I know a lot of people contribute Kobe Bryant's game to Michael Jordan, But many players that played with Michael Jordan or during Michael Jordan's time, along with coaches, have already stated Kobe Bryant took the mentality and the work ethic of Michael Jordan and found a way to amplify it, believe it or not. Which is why the phrase Mamba mentality has practically become a common phrase in the NBA. And is really the slogan for basketball excellence. In one minor contribution you can contribute to Kobe is that still to this day, whenever you're throwing a ball through a hoop, garbage in a trash, you yell one name and one name only, and that's Kobe. But now let's go into the 2010s, the modern decade, and there's one that's blatantly obvious. But first, let me start with Stephen Curry. Now, Stephen Curry is still in the middle of his career, so a lot of his effects haven't completely maternalized at this point. But even still, Stephen Curry has revolutionized the game throughout the entire basketball world. Whether you're playing recreationally, collegiately, or even professionally, the three-point shot is the staple of every offense in this decade. Kids, teens, and adults are shooting the three-point shot off the dribble, off balance, from anywhere inside the half-court line. And all that can be contributed to Stephen Curry. He's revolutionized the play style in the NBA like we haven't seen since Michael Jordan. But we all know the player that's impacted the game more than anyone else, really just other than Michael Jordan, and that's LeBron James. LeBron James has revolutionized basketball in every category imaginable. First, if we start with the brand, it's arguable that LeBron's the most influential athlete in the world. And regardless of what you think about LeBron's career, he without a doubt revolutionized the culture in the NBA, especially when you look at the aspect between the players union and the ownership in the NBA. LeBron James is easily the most influential figure in player empowerment, player mobility, and really overall player autonomy. And we all know he shifted that culture when he went to Miami, and easily the biggest free agent move the NBA's ever seen, to see arguably at the time the best player in the league to leave his team and join forces with another top 5 player in Dwayne Wade, which as we know has created a major ripple effect in the NBA, leading to so many super teams in the years following. But LeBron has also affected the cultural aspect of engaging in political and social commentary, whether it be through vocalizing his opinions through different mediums such as social media, on-court gestures, or through his philanthropy, which is a good segue into the business influence he's brought to the NBA, especially the players. LeBron James has been a major pusher in the collective bargaining agreement for increasing player salaries, and really his most influential business principles have been off of the court, whether it be starting his own production company, his own sports agency with the people he grew up with, and really the list goes on and on with his business endeavors. He's really opened up the avenues for NBA players to leverage while they're still playing in the NBA. And last but not least, the play style. The amount of players that want to do everything just like LeBron James is endless. You can look at a lot of these players today and notice the blend of Kobe Bryant and LeBron James they have in their game. LeBron James really brought back and popularized doing everything for the team while also making the right play. Now I know there's players I didn't necessarily cover in this video and expand on their contributions to the game, but when you look at the landscape of the modern NBA, whether it be the playing style, the business, the brand, or the culture surrounding the NBA, the contributions of these 10 players is undeniable in how they revolutionize basketball from every level of play, whether it's high school, college, professionally, overseas. You can see imprints of these 10 players across the globe. But that's all I got for y'all today. Make sure to hit the like button on this video if you appreciate and like content videos of this nature. Hit subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. More videos of these will be on the way. Let me know and comment what other players you think should have been on this list and didn't make the cut. But with all that being said, I'll catch y'all in the future.